And now, aviation weather around Alaska. Hello, pilots. I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan here now to bring you your Alaska aviation weather outlook. It is Saturday, September 16th, and the outlook is for Sunday into Monday. On Sunday morning, we'll have an area of low pressure out over the Gulf that's just above 970 millibars. So this is a stronger system, and it does have some stronger winds wrapping around it, along with the frontal band and precipitation. Further west, a low is passing south of the Aleutians in the North Pacific. That feature will drift northeastward up into the central Gulf, but will not become a dominant low. And then we have another low way off the Kamchatka Peninsula. It'll be working its way from the western Bering into the central Bering by Tuesday. And then across areas of the North Slope, a trough of low pressure will be lagging there across the Brooks Range and North Slope as we go through Monday. But IFR conditions are expected out over the central Gulf on Sunday morning. IFR along and north of the Brooks Range, especially through areas of the North Slope and Arctic coast, and then a broad area of IFR out over the Bering, including St. Paul back toward the central Aleutians by Sunday afternoon. Conditions, some IFR popping up in the far north end of the Panhandle around Chilkoot, White Passes, also out toward the intercoastal mountains abutting there with British Columbia. A broad area of IFR along the Arctic coast, western portion of the North Slope down through the lower Chukchi Sea, north side of the Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref down across St. Lawrence, St. Matthew, St. Paul, in through the eastern Aleutians. And Monday morning, we expect conditions to be VFR across much of south central up into the Yukon Valley, but IFR persisting here in the northwest, especially Utqiagvik down through the western portion of the Brooks and North Slope, and then again along the southwest coast, Hooper Bay, Etolan Strait, Nunavik Island back toward St. Matthew, St. Paul, and covering much of the central eastern Aleutians. And for Monday afternoon, the greatest concentration of IFR conditions will be up along the Arctic coast. They're just west of Utqiagvik through Kaktovik, and just north of the Brooks Range, especially there north of Adigan and Anatuvik passes, and then also lurking off the southwest coast, Etolan Strait, Nunavik Island back through St. Paul and St. Matthew down into parts of the central Aleutians. Pass conditions, though, for Sunday, Anatuvik Pass should generally be right on that borderline of MVFR. Same thing, Adigan Pass may see VFR early Sunday give way to MVFR conditions. Down along the west arm of the Alaska Range, MVFR will be the rule throughout the day Sunday, Lake Clark and Merrill. As we round up through Rainy Pass as well as Windy Pass, we'll see MVFR especially there through the morning, maybe VFR briefly early in the day there at Windy Pass before becoming MVFR. And same thing at Isabel Pass, VFR early in the day becoming MVFR, as well as further east toward Mentasta Pass. We expect VFR early on Sunday, giving way to MVFR conditions. Down across the Copper River Basin, some VFR conditions anticipated at Janita Pass in the morning, giving way to MVFR. And further south-southwestward, Portage Pass, MVFR there early Sunday, giving way to VFR conditions. And finally, the north end of the Panhandle at Chilkoot and White Passes, MVFR early in the day will become IFR because of the frontal band and precipitation working its way up further inland from off the northeastern Gulf Coast. Freezing levels aloft. Our lowest here associated with low pressure Sunday morning there in the central Gulf, right around or just below 4,000 feet. We have pockets of colder air aloft and through the mountains, Wrangell, St. Elias, on up to areas of western, northwest Canada and here along the Brooks Range. We see the surface freezing line there in areas of the northeast and in through the mountains of the far southeast interior. Freezing levels bump off once you get out back toward the central Aleutians near 8,000 feet. That is where the warmest air is from there southward now. Greatest threat for icing on Sunday. We could see considerable moderate icing above 10,000 feet over areas of the Panhandle. For the interior along and north of the Alaska Range above 7,000 feet, and then further north and west, some areas of considerable moderate icing there up along the northwest Arctic coast above 6,000 feet, and another broad area looking off the southwest coast encompassing the lower portion of the Alaska Peninsula and far eastern Aleutians above 6,000 feet, and then an area above 8,000 feet way out there toward the west-southwest portion of the Bering Sea. Upper level jet stream winds, this is 30,000 feet, roughly 250 millibar, 300 millibar level. Broad band of stronger anticyclonically curved winds, 90 to over 100 knots. Lower Gulf out over the North Pacific. Otherwise, out through the mainland, winds are not especially strong for those high levels at 700 millibars, bringing it down to 9,000 feet. Strongest winds are south of the low. That'll be the surface low that's sitting in the central Gulf Sunday morning. We find winds south of that could be as high as 55 to 60 knots out of the northwest. Another belt of winds in the 55 knot range south of the eastern Aleutians and the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. And then another area 40 to as high as locally 70 knots just to the southwest there of the far western Aleutians like Shemya and Attu. 3,000 foot level with the low situated here in the Gulf. We find a strong band of winds anywhere from 45 to as high as 60 knots just south of the low circulation center out over the lower southeastern Gulf, North Pacific. Another area back south of the eastern Aleutians and tip of the Alaska Peninsula as high as 45 to 55 knots. We do have some pretty good northwest flow coming in on just east of the Iliamna region across the entrance of Cook Inlet, northeast of Kodiak Island, a little belt of stronger winds on the order of 40 to 50 knots from the northwest there. And then along the eastern Arctic coast at 3,000 feet, there are winds from 35 to as high as 45 knots there, just to the north there of New Exit along the Arctic coast. The greatest threat for turbulence will be along areas of the Gulf Coast, including the Panhandle. Surface to 6,000 feet could see some moderate turbulence, as well as out here across the entrance, lower Cook Inlet, the lower portion, west arm of the Alaska Range as it dips there across the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island with the northwest flow. There could even be some isolated severe turbulence around, say, the entrance of Cook Inlet. And then also, I would also include there could be some localized moderate turbulence along areas of the Arctic coast here, the central Arctic coast as well, given those winds at 3,000 feet that could be as high as 35 to near 45 knots. And then an area of moderate turbulence as we go out through the western half of the Aleutians, especially from around Adak westward up through Shemya, surface to 3,000 feet. If you are able to lift off the ground, have a safe flight.